Brandon, how we doing, buddy?
Good morning, Josh. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, man. I wanted to have a conversation with you today, so we figured we'd record it as a podcast, basically a debrief with the Delta Double Triathlon that you and I just finished about a week and a half ago, and sort of give listeners an insight into our experience. For all the different stages that we went through, the 6 different stages, our training leading up to it, our fueling, just sort of like an in-depth look. So how's that sound?
That sounds great. I love talking shop and talking about races, so this will be fun.
Sweet, dude. The Co-Movement Gym podcast is supported by Native Path Supplements and Lombardi Chiropractic. Mention this podcast or click on the links in the episode description for a nice discount on us. So yeah, man, the Delta Double. So what is it, I guess? So it's a sprint triathlon. And if you can go sub 90 minutes on the sprint portion, you can walk to the start line of an Olympic distance triathlon. And so on the surface, that seems simple. At least like when I first heard about this race a few years ago from you, I was like, yeah, I can definitely go sub 90 on the sprint and, not too bad. It's an interesting race. There's a lot of strategy involved. It's not as easy as it sounds, which I guess we'll get into as we chat more on it. But that's really the breakdown of what the race is. As far as the number of participants and what we competed in, there was 233 total people that did the sprint or the Olympic, and there was 10 that did the Delta Double, and you and I are 2 of them. All right. So you want to add anything to that?
10 people foolish enough to sign up for both. Some of those participants might have also been doing what's called aqua bike, which is just swimming and biking. But yeah, overall, the only thing I would add is the time. The sprint starts at 7 a.m. So it's a pretty early start, and the Olympic for anybody doing that is 8:30. So you have that window, as you said, to get your sprint done and get back to the beach, wetsuit on if you're planning on swimming in a wetsuit, and ready to get back in and start the Olympic with everybody who's most of the participants, as you said, who are just doing that for the day.
Yeah, and there may be listeners that don't know what is required with a sprint and an Olympic distance. So let's just review that quick. So sprint distance triathlon is 750 meter swim in the open water, 11-mile bike for this course approximately, and then a 5K run. And then the Olympic distance is double that. Okay. And so, yeah, so let's start off, I guess, obviously a race like this takes some prep work. For me personally, it was my biggest endurance event ever. I've done a handful of Olympic distance triathlons. I've done a handful of sprint distance. I've never combined them. And I've never done a half Ironman. So for me, it was, a new experience with going that far, right? 4+ hours for me. So Brandon, how did you prep leading into it? Let's say starting in January. I know it's more like a year-round thing for us, for sure. But what kind of blocks did you tackle? Like, what were your thoughts going into your training, and what did some volume look like?
Yeah. Just to piggyback as well, this race for me was in 2019, I did the Olympic. It was the first time I had stepped into that distance. And as with any endurance sport, at the time, that's the goal and it's the biggest thing you've done. And then you kind of often people are adding to it. So in 2022, I came back and did the double for the first time and have done it every year since. And just like you, in 2022, this was the longest and the biggest thing that I had done. And it's a pretty overwhelming task at that point to take on. So, for anybody listening that it sounds overwhelming, usually there's just steps before that and you get there. But to answer your question, yeah, I'm training for the most part year round, a lot less volume and intensity through the winter, but trying to be always consistent, and that's part of my just maintenance. And because I enjoy it, I'm trying to stay active doing something most days year around. But it's much shorter in duration and again, a lot lower in intensity. So um, early in the year, I was focusing on, I was actually training to do well at a 10K. So I was really keeping my 10K speed on the running side. I try to stay sharp between 5 and 10K speed, in touch with that at all times. So a lot of focus on that. And indoor bike training using Zwift and a trainer, trying to stay fairly fit on the bike. I personally don't enjoy spending long days in my basement doing long
No.
endurance rides. So that's part of my fitness that falls off in the winter. I'm good for, maybe up to an hour on the trainer before I'm ready to lose my mind. But I actually think for me, I'm probably uh, the 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 indoor training is probably some of the best bike training that I get. And so even though the volume and the endurance end isn't there, I come into the spring feeling pretty sharp on those two things. And swimming, I try to pick up increasingly through the spring. Similarly, I don't have a lot of access to a pool, so I'm getting there once or twice a week at best through the winter and the spring. But once we head into summer, I have more access to swimming. Open water opens up, and try to do just more of that heading into the race. And me specifically, swimming being one of kind of I'd say my weakest of the three in a lot of ways. I wanted to increase my volume and frequency of swimming each week, just to make that part of the race feel less overwhelming and more manageable.
Mhm. Do you find the pool swimming or open water swimming more difficult?
I enjoy open water swimming a whole lot more, as I think most people do, but it tends to be more difficult. I'm
Yeah.
much faster in a pool. There's just less variables and less to compete with, and it's easier to do intervals, and you're resting at the wall a lot of times. So in some ways, it inflates my belief of who I am as a swimmer. And then
Yeah.
you get into the open water, and in a triathlon, you're getting kicked in the face and
Yeah.
pushed under, and it's really a whole nother animal. Then the conditions, Delta Lake is pretty forgiving, except for some of the seaweed that's hundreds of yards out.
Mhm.
But open water, I just tend to be slower in general. But as we talked about, I'm sure we'll get into, you have the advantage of wearing a wetsuit and drafting, and these are all small things that add up over the course of an endurance race.
Yeah, I asked that question for a reason because there's a open water swimming compared to pool swimming mentally is a big difference. And then you throw in 60 to 100 people that are kicking and clawing and zigzagging, and then you have the sun reflection off the water, and you're looking for buoys, and when you don't have the line when you put your head in the water or keep your head in the water, you should be, there's no line for direction. So now you have to do sightseeing every few strokes to make sure you're swimming straight. So because I've had a lot of people say that they're interested in doing a sprint triathlon. My first question is, do you know how to swim? Because 750 meters for you and I, no big deal. But for if you can't swim efficiently, no matter how tough you are and you think you could survive it, or you could doggy paddle if you had to, it's a lot farther than you think.
It is, and you're right. So a couple other variables: sighting. At Delta in particular, you're rounding and coming back, and the sun is rising, so you
Yeah.
can't see very well.
No.
And at race intensity, as many times as we've done this, that you go out harder at times than you plan to, and your breathing is higher. And being out in the open water, pretty far from shore, it can be anxiety provoking. And I know a lot of experienced and skilled and fit swimmers who get out there and hyperventilate a bit and have to pause, roll over on the back. It's not that uncommon.
Yep.
So just having the experience doing all of that heading into an event like this or any other triathlon is valuable.
Yeah. So for listeners, if this is something you're thinking of tackling, learn to swim in the pool. Excellent. And get into the open water before race day, just so you know what it's like to feel like being a half mile from shore or a third of a mile from shore, and obviously have a spotter or a swim buoy with you. But yeah, so that's important. All right, sweet. Yeah. So for me, gosh, yeah, winter time. This was the first winter I used a bike trainer. It's boring as hell. But it works. I just what you said, I hit springtime um in definitely the best biking shape of my life. And I have about that 1 hour cap also on the trainer inside before I start to lose my mind. So I'm doing 30 to 60 minutes of riding. And so that was a big change over the winter. I do a lot of my running in the wintertime at an indoor track at Hamilton College. It's a 200 meter. So when you're running 5 and 10 Ks, that's a lot of times around a track. I get really good at counting, but there's advantages to that too. It's a stable environment. I know my split times really accurately. And I'll run outside too. I do both, but I enjoy the Hamilton College piece too with the indoor track. So as far as volume goes, like it fluctuates for me, but my average generally is 2 to 4 swims per month. Okay. Being that my swimming is probably the best out of the three events, believe it or not. I just learned to swim 5 years ago, but I'm not a great runner. I'm not a great biker. I'm a pretty decent swimmer for some reason. So I don't focus a ton on the swimming, but I'll do 2 to 4 a month of swims, generally about a 1 mile distance, maybe 1,700 yards. You throw in warm up, cool down, so maybe 2,200 yards total for a session. 15 to 30 miles a week on the bike. 15 for a lot of the weeks, but then, I'm 30 or over peaking towards that race, or for white face race, the volume will go up on that closer to race time. 15 to 25 miles a week of running. And it's somewhat specific, like 3 days a week. I'll do generally 2 zone 2 runs of varying distances, like 30 to 90 minutes. And then I'll do 1 day a week of speed training. And the speed training has been a huge game changer. So Andy Sipley, the trainer here at Co-Movement, and my brother-in-law, he really helps me with programming like VO2 max training, lactate threshold. There's all these different frameworks that he has built out. And then I sort of plug and play my numbers with work sets, rest times, number of sets, and that speed training, just like the bike training, and the trainer in the wintertime, the speed training was that kind of result for my running. I believe, like, you need some speed training in your running. I know that you definitely do that too, but can you speak to that a little bit too, Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what you were asking about January to present. I usually feel like I want to be very fast in the spring at everything, and then move that into volume and be able to go far through the summer.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I'll ever be able to answer exactly how to do it, but trying to stay in touch with speed while building endurance, becomes the focus through the summer. So in a lot of ways, I feel a little bit slower day to day doing whatever activity it is right now. But that's because of going further and adding a lot of volume. So similar to you, on an ideal week, I like to have a shorter swim workout, ideally in the pool, and a longer endurance swim. I like to have a shorter bike workout, higher intensity, and some endurance, longer ride on the weekend. And same thing for running, usually always a running workout once a week to stay sharp and fast. And the long runs aren't as frequent as the volume builds, maybe twice a month, but trying to stay in touch on the longer end of running as well. So it never feels like it's too far to go to get back into even half marathon shape if I were to do that. And then in between, any number of recovery, easy efforts of kind of any sport. And, sometimes I treat that a little bit loose of what I'm feeling like doing, or if I'm dreading something, it's nice in triathlon to, if I'm on a recovery day, maybe I don't want to run, but swimming sounds appealing. I'll just do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Those speed days, I think translate to making those long runs easier.
Yeah,
Yeah. You
I
think so
agree.
too?
One hand washes the other with this stuff. You know, when you're getting faster, that speed, whether it be biomechanical or cardiovascular, that speed shows up in your long runs. And same thing, doing all that long, slow, easy stuff, zone two, mitochondrial development, that helps you go faster as well. So we want to be on both ends of that at all times, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I also had some bike hill training because I do that white face, that climb, that race there in June, the beginning of June. So um, I believe that like the volume of hill climbing that I was doing to prep for that definitely helps longer, flatter rides for sure. My legs just feel stronger, right? More muscle, higher tolerance to lactate. So it's funny that I've done the whiteface uphill bike race twice now, and I've sort of been doing it for fun, but it's interesting because it does lead into that Delta double. I think it's like 6 or 7 weeks apart. So it
Mhm.
does complement, that too.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I mean, I usually have a couple of races that are fun, but I try to go pretty hard at them leading up into a race like this. So this year was a couple sprint distant triathlons. I would have loved to have done an Olympic somewhere in there, but it just didn't fit. But to what you're saying, excuse me, like uphill biking, similar to indoor bike training, you have pressure on the pedals the whole time.
Yeah.
That's an experience that's hard to replicate in an easy ride or a casual ride, even a longer, endurance session on a bike where you're rolling. I'm still very much working on that experience of what it's like to keep constant pressure on the pedals, whether you're going over a hill, down a hill, or on a
Yeah.
flat. Our instinct is to use them to rest and recover, but you lose a lot of speed that way. And then when you come to race day, and you're trying to go hard for the full distance of whatever it is, that can feel like a new experience because if you haven't really trained that. So
Yeah.
indoor training, a hill race like you're describing, I think is great leading up into something like this.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and I know that you and I both work on like transitions as far as like brick sessions, I guess they're call them.
Yep.
Generally the bike to the run. And so I built in about a month before a decent amount of those, maybe twice a week. Even if I was only running like 1 mile, 3 miles, sometimes I did 6 after the bike. That is a whole skill set too, because you could be a great runner or a great biker, but can you bike then run? And it's fascinating to me. This is really sort of the first year I took that a little serious, where like gauging how do I feel immediately coming off the bike, where do I feel close to fully recovered, right? Like checking in instead of saying like, oh, I'm off the bike, I survived it, let's just run now, without really gauging things. I geeked out to that pretty good for, I'd say, a good month. And my transitions this time around felt, pretty spectacular.
That's great. Yeah, I would kind of put that under the umbrella of race specificity. So in the month or 6 weeks leading up into any event, and this one in particular, it's doing more brick sessions. And as you said, that might just be 15 or 20 minutes easy, but coming right off the bike and knowing what that's going to feel like. And the answer to that is usually bad. It feels
Yeah.
bad at first, but you want to be used to that. And we talked a lot about just saving time in transition and the skill set
Yeah.
around that. I love free speed. So if you can be fast in transition, if you can do things like draft in the water, move through aid stations quickly, that's free time that adds up and doesn't even require fitness. It just requires preparation and some thought.
Yeah, we're talk about the transition. Like you helped me a lot, and we'll talk a little bit of detail on the transition piece in a little bit here. But there was a few. I just wanted to mention two before we move on. Two critical takeaways that I had this year. We'll get into like our final thoughts at the very end here, but this is regarding training, which is what we're talking about now. And both of them were from my conversation with Mark Wilson, the race director and the host for the Delta Double and the Delta Triathlon, Delta Lake. Was he had said in our conversation to bike more because I was only doing 15 miles a week, pretty much flatline across the board, irregardless of hills or whatever. I was just like 15. And he had said, just bike more. And I definitely increased my volume after speaking to him. And that helped a lot. Like Mark is a very experienced triathlete. And then the second thing he said, and thank God I did this, he said to test yourself at full distance, race distance before the race, obviously a few weeks before the race, and you're not going race speed. But I did one session where I biked 11, ran a 5K, or actually it was 3.4 is my loop. And then I biked 22 or 23, and then I ran 6.8. It took 3 hours and 44 minutes, and it had a significant amount of hills. And I did that 2 Saturdays before the Delta Double. And that was huge for me. I knew at that point in time that I could definitely finish because the swimming I wasn't concerned about. I was actually looking forward to the second swim because it's a cool down. You're in the water, I can sort of zone out a little bit. But like that advice from Mark with testing yourself at full, he actually recommended in some cases going farther than full distance, which I did with the run. I did the 3.4 and the 6.8 as opposed to the 3 and the 6. But that built confidence. I was able to really dial in that fueling. Like, how did the lemonade go? Did I need more? Did I need less? Did I pee, after? Was I dehydrated? Like, did I cramp anywhere? And I did it on a nasty day. I did it on like one of those high 80 humid days. And I sort of did that on purpose. I wanted it just to be shitty. Yeah. And so like, I wasn't going for time. I wasn't going for any expectation. All I did was check in during that whole process to see where I am, right? Physically, mentally. And so that was a big, and I'll do that again. I'll do that again. I'll have one fake race day, right? And then reassess from there. Do you do anything similar to that or no?
Not necessarily. I mean, I agree with most of what you're saying. I going into this one was probably less specific than other times where I've done this race. But I do like to kind of have a run through of everything before the race. I mean, I think it's good idea to do nothing new on race day. So all the gear is worn, riding the actual bike that you're going to ride on race day. If there's anything new in terms of you're not introducing new fuel or nutrition days before, so in the sessions leading up, if not all in one, I'm trying to check all those boxes. So as I go into it, there's nothing that I'm feeling like I'm trying out for the first time. Mm-hmm. And so in the weeks leading up, I'm probably doing everything that you're saying you were trying to do in one session. Mm-hmm. But I was certainly putting together long days and brick days that were at or around the amount of time that I assumed I would be out there for.
Okay. Yeah. So similar then, as far as if you look at it from like volume standpoint.
Yeah.
Similar.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, sweet. So let's dive into fueling. Obviously over a 3 to 4 to 5 hour event, you can't just go out and do it. Like you could have 5 or 10K. The body after that 1 hour, 75-minute mark definitely requires fuel to keep moving, or else you're going to bonk. So tell me about like your strategy with that, Brandon.
Yeah, I was anticipating being out there for about 3.5 hours, kind of moving between a steady state effort up to like a tempo effort, and obviously sometime closer to zone 2. But with 3.5 hours, I wanted to take in about 250 to 300 grams of carbs over that time. Try to do the upper end of that if possible. And this is part of the planning for this specific race of deciding when to do that. I thought the bike would be the best time on both bike legs to try to get the most calories and carbs in. So I was using a scratch high carb mix that had about 100 grams in it. And on both bike legs, took that in during the in between the races. I took a precision 90-gram carb gel. I don't think I got all of it in, but as much as I could. And similarly, before the last run, I took a caffeinated gel that I think had 25 grams of carbs. So doing all that while staying hydrated. And then on the last run, I know my stomach isn't feeling great at that point.
Yeah.
I'm usually just trying to drink water. And this time I didn't take any calories in on the last run. But a lot of thought on a stage race like this and deciding not only how much in total, but the timing of all of that. And again, I think it's easier to digest on the bike than sloshing around on the run. And obviously you can't do it on the swim.
Yeah, yeah. So you and I did pretty darn similar. I looked at, like, for me, it was a 4 to 4.5 hour event. So I wanted about 350, I think, to 375 grams of carbs. Yeah. So I was running at like 75 grams of carbs an hour. Again, mostly from the bike. I didn't take in any fuel during the 5K run, but I did between the run and the next swim. Then yeah, the 2 bikes I took in most. I think I took in, gosh, it had to be 120 to 150 total, on those bike. So each bike, yeah. I got in probably 3/4 of my carbs on the bike.
I think
Um,
that's a good strategy in general. So we were similar, and I think a lot of what's out now is usually pointing people towards 75 to 100 grams of carbs per hour of effort. And something as a result of this race that I didn't do that day, and learning more about how to supplement would be more sodium and electrolytes, because still learning and dealt with some cramps that day that has me on a mission to try to avoid that moving forward.
Well, that was my next thing on here. I did 750 milligrams of sodium, and then it's with the full electrolyte spectrum. But for sodium, I did about 750. But I had, and we'll talk about this when we get there, but like massive hamstring cramps the first 3 miles of that last 10K. I'm not sure why. I guess we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but yeah, so that was for sodium, 750 an hour. And then my carbs came from lemonade, which was from Andy. He did it during his I think he did pretty much almost all lemonade during his 50 miler in Ithaca. Digested well for me, really easy to calculate what you're taking in. I think it's 32 grams of carbs per 8 ounces. So you're getting in a lot. It tastes good. So yeah, that worked well for me, the lemonade. I didn't do that last year.
I mean, I'm in constant thought, wondering if all these expensive nutrition brands and mixes and gels, I'm sure they're putting plenty of science into it, but lemonade and salt tabs, it might work just as well for a lot of people, particularly if you're stepping into it and just, you shouldn't be doing it on water alone. You need to be putting something in, and that may be a really accessible way to both train and race.
Yeah, it was lemonade. It was the electrolyte powder. And then, yeah, before the race, what did you eat before the race? I know you and I talked on the phone sort of the day before, but I'll tell you what I ended up doing in a second. But what did you do? Like, what time did you eat? It was a 7 a.m. start. What time did you eat, and what did you eat before?
Yeah, I just want to put an asterisk on this for a second, Josh, as we're talking, that, you know, I think specifically with nutrition, let alone anything else in training, it's very individualized,
Yeah.
so these are we're given pretty broad rules of thumb. But if someone's listening and they're going out to do it themselves, they should be dialing it in and experimenting. And again, in training before a race day, I wouldn't want anybody to just do what I did and think that that's going to work for them. I've done that many times listening to people, and it usually doesn't work.
Yeah.
But ideally, I like to have a small breakfast 2 to 3 hours before the race with a 7 a.m. start. That's hard to do because I'm probably getting up at about 4:30, 5 o'clock and not wanting to eat too much right away. But I usually have something like oatmeal with peanut butter and berries. That's my standard pre-race breakfast. But more important than that, again, is trying to time that so there's not digestion happening,
Yeah.
right at the beginning of the race. And I even roll that back to the day before, where I'll try to have a big late lunch, kind of early dinner in the kind of early to mid afternoon, and then whatever for dinner is very light and nothing that's going to be hard to digest that night. So I'm thinking that through, even probably more like 24 hours in advance.
Yeah, and what you said, it plays into, like, if you look at the digestion cycle of say 12 hours, we want by race time to be pretty emptied out, right?
Right.
And so if you're eating a light meal at 6 p.m. and then you go to the bathroom the last time at say 6:30 a.m. right
Mhm.
before, you're hopefully clearing the majority of that out.
Right.
Yeah,
And
I did.
you're not racing on the fuel from your breakfast that day.
No,
Hopefully, your
no.
glycogen is
Yeah.
loaded up from the days leading up into it. So there's no need to think you have to have a big breakfast in order to perform on that.
Yeah.
You're going to be replenishing that glycogen as it gets depleted, but you're
Mhm.
probably loaded up if you've been thinking it through from the days of what you were eating leading up to it.
And what you said was important, how you had like a bigger lunch, right? Or like a later lunch that was big and then a lighter dinner. You see a lot of these athletes that will take in like a big dinner to carb up,
Yeah.
right? Like for people listening, like that's got to get all through you.
To
and
get
you,
through
and you,
and for me, something like that might affect my sleep.
oh yeah,
If
big
I'm
time. Me
eating too
too.
much too late, um, that's I'm trying to get a decent night's sleep. It's never great the day before a race, but again, eating further away from when you're going to bed usually is going to be good for your sleep.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the morning of, so I took your advice on that the day before. And then I had at 5:30 or 5:45 in the morning, I had like 4 squares of dark chocolate, like 90% dark chocolate. And I had a perfect bar. It's like 350 calories of like peanut butter, honey, some protein powder maybe in there. I eat both of those a lot, and I know they digest really well and really clean for me. And so I had that, and then yeah, we kicked it off at 7 a.m. and we were off. All right, so let's get into stage one. Stage one was 750-meter swim. Um, how'd that go for you? Any takeaways, or did you just bang it out?
Kind of just banged it out. It was pretty uneventful. Realized again there was a lot of seaweed to contend with on the
Yeah.
first as you were heading out. Um, but I felt pretty good going through the swim. We both remarked about uh, how much drafting takes place
Yeah.
in a race with 100 people out there with you. Felt like that was pulling me along, but I was going into that just thinking, kind of go steady through this. Don't wear yourself out early. It's going to be a long day, and that's kind of how
Yeah.
that went. How about you?
Same. The drafting thing was cool. I never picked up on it in all the other races. I just sort of felt like I was always going faster when I was behind someone. But this year, I almost felt like I was being propelled forward. Obviously, I was swimming faster. I had a wetsuit on. But this year I noticed it, and it helped for sure. The swim was fine. I had a mantra going into this race. I do with most of my races, I write it on my left hand. This year it was relax with speed. So you can still move fast, but you're relaxed instead of that panic, red line, tense mode. Um, and I use that in a lot of my training too, like realizing, like, relax your toes, splay your feet, relax your hands, drop your shoulders, pull your shoulder blades back, breathe. Like you can still be aggressive and move quick, but relaxed.
Okay.
And that was a huge takeaway for me. So I took that right from the start. I knew this one wouldn't be a problem. I just wanted to get out of the water feeling good. Um, and I also just focused my attention only on the swim, not focused on the big day ahead, right? Like, and then the last maybe 100 or 200 meters, I started thinking and rehearsing in my head about that transition. Get out of the water, take half your wetsuit off as you're getting to the bike, what to do. Like it's sort of just a mind game, right? In the water, it's sort of take your mind off the swim, but you're prepping for that transition. So,
Yeah, I really like that. I mean, it's so hard to anticipate where your head's going to be at in the middle of an event. And, when your heart is racing and you're excited and fatigued. So to be doing those mindful cues each step of the way, I do my own version of that. I think
mhm,
it's really helpful. As I'm approaching the shore, I'm going to be taking my cap off, my goggles, unzipping the wetsuit, knowing where I want to be during that, and being really smooth through transition, which is all
yep,
set up in advance.
yeah, yeah. All right, then we get out of the water, we go through our transition, then we bike approximately 11 miles, flat course, fast. Anything, any insights on that, or did you just hammer that out?
I wouldn't, it wasn't so much a mantra, but my aim was to stay steady all day. So in that first bike, it was holding back a little bit. It is
Yeah.
a fast course. It's pretty forgiving. It's a little short of normally a sprint is 12 miles. I think this one's more like 11. So there's a lot of room to really fly on it. I'm not the strongest cyclist to begin with, but I know that I can do a lot of damage if I go too hard on the bike, particularly too early. So I was just trying to move along well. Hopefully see some of the bike fitness show up there, but stay pretty steady through that. And similarly,
Mhm.
that's how that went.
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing I focused on with that, I knew the time I wanted to do it in, which I did. But I didn't the last maybe mile or two on the bike. I wanted to make sure that I kept the power on, but I wasn't blasting through into anything difficult because I wanted to get into that run feeling really confident. And I remember it was one of your friends there that you had raced with, really good racer. He had said to me, don't run the last mile of that 5K fast. And I remember that. So I tried to work pretty aggressively up until that last mile to position myself on the last mile to where I could slow down a little bit.
Yeah.
And again, mentally rehearse, what am I going to do in that transition, getting ready, where am I? And so cuz we know that at 8:30 that race starts, and so you can't be getting into the transition at 8:30. You need to be doing well under sub 90, right? They say sub 90 you can move on, but it's not like if you do it in 89 minutes you're not going to be able to get to the start line. It's probably a 300-meter walk, plus you got to get a wetsuit, you got to change out of your shoes. So like, this is what I said in the beginning, it's a little trickier than it sounds,
Yes, it is.
because sure, a lot of people maybe are like, yeah, I could do 89 minutes or 80, 5. Yeah, but
It's gonna be tight. It's going to
you've
get
got
hard.
to yeah, and you've got to completely reload and get back to that water in time. So I did it in 79 minutes. What did you do it in?
I was an hour 10 and change, so 70 and some change. And part of that,
Mhm.
I wanted to be at an hour 10. I think
Yep.
the swim course this year was maybe 100 yards
It
further
was. It was.
than previous years. And so I'm realizing that as I'm coming through, thinking, how am I over 70 minutes? I think a couple extra minutes in the swim. I don't know that I'm creating a conspiracy theory there. We'll have to ask Mark Wilson. Yeah, I was right. I was pretty close to where I wanted to be, maybe drifted 30 or 45 seconds over. And that's good advice on the run. I should probably have taken that. Running is the strongest of my three sports, and I wanted to be about 7-minute miles on that. I think I was 7:05 or 7:06, but feeling pretty good on the run. And that is the one place where I was seeing my heart rate get up. I was,
Mhm.
more in a higher tempo range at that point and building some lactate that I was hoping I could clear out with a
Mhm.
little, I had about 20 minutes in between the two races.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We just sort of jumped to the run there. We sort of blended the bike and the run, but yeah, those were Yeah, I guess that was really, I felt good going into that transition. I had plenty of time. Talked to you for a little bit there for a few minutes before the start of that swim. And then you had said a few things to me there waiting to start that, like, just get in the water, get into a groove, relax, sort of recover on the swim. Which I did. I felt, the funny thing was, as soon as I hit the water felt really good. And I didn't gosh, I don't know, like, there wasn't a huge recovery needed from the sprint.
Mhm.
I wouldn't have wanted to go any faster, and maybe that 79 is that sweet spot for me, but um, I felt pretty good on that swim going into it. How did you feel getting into the water again?
I feel pretty good physically. Mentally, to me, that's one of the harder points of the day is getting done. And, I put a decent effort in on the sprint, and to put the wetsuit back on, go back to the beach and restart, even physically feeling well, it's sort of at that point always dawns on me of like, now I'm doing this again and doing, really two more of those because the Olympic is
Mhm.
twice the length. So kind of mentally getting my head back into it. And it took me the first half of the Olympic swim to kind of get back into a groove. And similarly, felt like I kind of caught a rhythm by the end of the swim, which was nice. But yeah,
Mhm.
there's something about suiting back up and getting back in the water that's a little strange.
Well, for me, I think the swim was sort of relaxing and felt good because I was thrilled I made it.
Right. I
I
thought
got
I thought for you it was a great strategy to get through the sprint and not that you could rest on your laurels after that, but as soon as I had said to you and you didn't need to do this, like all you got to do is get to the Olympic start line. You could stand for 5 minutes after the race goes off and breathe and
uh-huh.
relax or go really slow. Like at that point, it's you have the breathing
Yeah,
room to just try to finish.
yeah.
You don't have that breathing room in the sprint. You have to get that done in order to restart.
Yeah, and I never forgot that when you told me that, where you said don't be afraid to sort of do what you need to during the sprint to get to part two, right? And then you had said then technically you could just go Z2 the whole Olympic. And in my mind, I'm like, I could definitely do that. So that was it almost like relaxed me, even though I went beyond the Z2 and I was able to go faster, but I gave myself permission saying, good job on the sprint. Now you're in your comfort zone. You can cruise if you need to with this Olympic and get through it. So
The
that was a
goal
good,
changes midway
yeah,
through, and that's a fun part about this.
it did. It did. There was one thing though I want to add in for me that happened on that swim, the second swim, was my hamstrings started to cramp. And I had never had that on a swim before because you're not really using hamstrings. But when you sightsee, your head comes out of the water and your feet drop a little. So you bend at the knees slightly.
Right.
And gosh, dude, like the first like 200 yards, my right one cramped and that locked pretty hard. So now I'm swimming with two arms and a leg, and then the other leg sort of deadlocked, right? And like good form, I'm able to do that, okay, because you're more rotating in the torso, right? Um, and so that was sort of concerning, slightly annoying. And then my other one did it. And I'm like on my first lap. And now I've got two hamstring cramps where I'm swimming like a dead seal and I've got, again, if you stay hollow and good position, you've got your wetsuit. Like I was never like, oh, I'm fucked, like I knew like I could work through this, but I was like, this sucks. Like, why are my hamstrings cramping? I'm like, 100 or 120 minutes into this event. And I can't tell you why. So on the second lap of that swim, they went away, which was odd because I didn't take any fuel. And then I was nervous going into the bike because I didn't know because half of that cycle with the pedal is hamstrings, right? You pull, push, pull, push. I was like, man, if my hamstrings lock up and I'm in my bike pedals, like I can't get my feet out without losing tons of speed. Like what? Thankfully, my hamstrings were fine on the bike. And then we'll talk about the run in a second. But I had never had that before. Have you ever had cramping like in the water of any sort, or are you pretty clear of that?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm all too familiar with that experience, and they come out of nowhere. It's really alarming, as you said, and really painful for the time being. And I distinctly remember the first time it happened to me at this race a couple years ago. It's scary because you wonder, am I now in for this for the rest of the race?
Yes.
But
Yes.
having the luxury of cramped many times, you also learn that usually these things work themselves out, and actually getting to the next sport can sometimes feel really good because you're using different muscles and there's room to move. But I think I got some strange, I think they were foot cramps this time around. To me, I think it's something about one, getting back in the water on fatigued legs, which is different, and that the fixed position that you're in, you're holding your muscles in a in a bit more of a static position. And there's probably something I could really learn about trying to avoid that. But on the other end, I just accept it and almost anticipate it happening at some point and know that it doesn't have to be a day ender.
Yeah, that was odd on the swim for me. It was definitely a mental
Yeah.
piece going in, knowing you've got to swim almost a mile. You're, not totally fatigued, but you're fatigued. And it's like shit starting to break down. And you're like, what the fuck? Like mentally I'm fine. And then it's the first time I've ever actually swam without without being able to bend the knees for a period of time, which was very interesting. Like I said, it was like I was still able to kick because you could kick from the hip, right, with straight legs. But it was an interesting little strategy, and you have to stay relaxed. You can't freak
Yeah.
out, but yeah, okay,
That's
cool. So
where, I say this knowing that there's a lot of people that have done things a lot longer than 3 or 4 hours, but I would still call this an endurance event,
yeah,
absolutely. And we were talking about this where you can do a lot of prep for a lot of things, but then it's dealing with the unexpected in the moment as it's happening and keeping your cool. That's a learned skill along the way, and you have to start troubleshooting and making good decisions while you're literally in the water or exhausted or whatever it is. But I think that's that's something that comes with time as well.
yeah, yeah. Good point. All right, so then we jumped back on the bike. For me, the bike was smooth, a lot of fuel. I did the bike this year in the exact same time as I did it last year for the Olympic only, but I did the same time coming off the sprint, right? So my bike was I was happy with that. I think it was 70 or 71 minutes. And I did that, like I said, last year for just the Olympics. So overall stronger. And again, I think it was the hill training and it was the trainer in the winter. But how'd that go for you?
It went pretty well. I was again trying to just stay steady through it. I felt my power fading a little bit towards the end and maybe the last 5 miles or so. But overall, it felt pretty smooth. Like similarly, focus on fueling and trying not to do too much damage heading into the last run. But again, I felt the fatigue starting to come on, particularly on the second loop of the bike.
Mhm.
Um, Pretty expected, I guess, at that point, but kind of knowing that there's still a 10K run left in it. I think my time was very consistent across both legs. I think I was 32 minutes for the sprint and 64 or 65 for the Olympic. And that was an improvement on last year. I'd like to be faster than that, but I was pretty happy with what I did on the bike.
Sure. Yeah, man, that's hauling. For people listening, what's that, like 20 miles an hour, a little more?
It's about that. Yeah.
21. Yeah, that's cruising. All right, then the last run. So you get off the bike, you got to run a 10K. For me, the hamstrings came back and it was one leg, then it went away, then the other, and then both. And then I had to stop 2 or 3 times to like do a toe touch almost to try to get them to relax. And I knew my fueling was fine. I had to almost like pee towards the end of the race, which is a good sign. Um, but yeah, so then the first 3 miles I had to deal with that. I still did I think I still held on to like an 8:50 or 9-minute mile, which I was happy considering my run form sucked with that. But the last 3 miles, they went away. And
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. I talked with Andy after, and he said it's probably just like, your body was just fatigued and breaking down. Like there's not an error on your part. It's just you're tired. Your body doesn't is know what's going on as much. Your nervous system's getting wrecked, and things are just starting to slowly go down. So, but yeah, I never panicked with them last year. The last 3 miles of that 10K, I cramped in my hamstrings and I did have a little mini panic attack. I was like, oh shit, I'm going to have to walk this. I'm going to have to quit. This whole day is going to be fucking blown. And like this year, when they hit, I told myself, this is exactly what I said. You've been here. That's what I told myself. And I never freaked out. And they did go away. But yeah, I know that you had some cramping in the run.
I did. Yeah, I came off the bike feeling pretty psyched to run again. I usually feel pretty confident doing that, and um, in about half a mile in, found myself similarly standing on the trail, holding both of my quads at a standstill and a walk for I don't know how long it was. It felt like it was a couple minutes. I don't actually think that it was, but usually I'm coming off the bike and I'm feeling heavy in the legs, but that actually gets better as the run goes along, as my legs loosen up. So as I was feeling that happening, I wasn't initially too concerned, but then that just grew and grew to realizing that I had a real problem on my hands. So similarly, I was pretty discouraged and thought maybe I'm going to be, bailing on this. I don't want to walk with, I mean, they're so painful. Anybody who's ever had a muscle cramp, it's just, it doesn't matter how tough you are. It hurts so bad. And I was like, I don't know if I want to just gut this out for 6 miles for the sake of finishing and probably be laid up for a week and a half after if I do that. But, similar to you, I kind of reassessed and paradoxically, I think it's probably the thing I was the most proud of looking back is that, there's been plenty of times where I have dealt with something like cramps and just tried to power through it to my own detriment, to the point that it just goes well beyond what I should be doing. And in this situation, I just kind of committed to, I have to have a new running goal. I'm not going to run as fast as I thought I was, but if I can manage this problem, I can still salvage a pretty good day and a pretty good run. So I just tried to move slowly at first and maintain. I was trying to go out at about a 7-minute mile for reference, and then I'm standing still, and then got moving again at like an 8:30 or 9. And after a mile or two, I just kind of the cramps went away, and I was able to honestly by mile 4 or 5 actually find pretty close to the pace that I was aiming for. So as that was happening, my confidence came back and I felt kind of encouraged that I was able to deal with it. And, you start seeing the finish line pretty close and that gets exciting. So, yeah, I think I finished, I don't know what the time was, but my pace was somewhere around 7:40 or 7:45. I lost a few minutes off of my goal in that, but again, it was a good lesson learned and a good opportunity to, for me personally, to learn about how to deal with a problem and not make it worse.
What do you think? Because obviously this is on the low end of the endurance sports, right? You have the half Ironman, you have Ironman, you have these 50-miler runs, 100-mile, like, and you and I both had cramping issues. For me, it's 2 years in a row. We think our fueling is dialed in. Is there something with training that we're not tapping into? Do our legs need to get stronger from a like a like a strength perspective? Like, I don't know. I don't have the answer. My hamstrings after that for the first week after were like not locked, but like tight and sore. Like they really went into overdrive, and I felt that for a while.
Yeah,
I
there's a
don't
lot
know
of muscle
how.
damage that happens.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Like, but I'm just looking at it now, like, we're a year away, right? For doing that again. For you, you have another big race coming up, but like, I don't know what to change. Like, do we have to maybe do some longer, like, trainings. Like I only did the one real long one. Like, I don't know. Do you have any insight into that? Or is it just, it comes with the territory?
For this particular time for me, I think electrolyte and sodium might be the cause. I was relying
Mhm.
on what was in my in my nutrition, in my scratch, and kind of feel silly having done this as long as I have to realize that that probably wasn't enough. So I think that was a large part of it. But up until this point, I've always just kind of came at this problem with get fitter,
Mhm.
and that helps.
Yeah.
But there's a nutrition and a hydration piece, absolutely. There's a nervous system element. Some people are more cramp prone. I think I'm one of those people. But I think the biggest lever to pull on is always going to be get fitter. And
Yeah.
I know I didn't want to hear that or tell myself that early on. I thought if I just got a different gel or
Yep.
whatever, bought a new bike that it would
Yep.
solve it. But usually for me, it comes down to that. But so I think it's a combination of the fitness that comes from fatigue resistance and just training over time and strength, paired with nutrition and hydration.
Yeah. One thing, and maybe this is something we should both look into. I think I took in more electrolytes than you, but by the sounds of it, ish.
Yeah.
But I was cramping on that swim, and I got to that transition, and there was a lady next to me also transitioning, and she had said, "Oh, do you have your I can see you have your swim legs or something," like, because I was walking odd because my hamstrings were killing me. And I said, "No," I said, "my hamstrings are locked up." And she said, "Here, take this." And she handed me this cylinder of salt, like pure salt, where you put your thumb on the end and you dab your thumb, you take the thumb in the mouth and you take in sodium. I did 3 big thumbfuls of pure salt. And then I washed it down with water, or whatever, Relight. And I didn't have any cramps on the run, or I'm sorry, on the bike. Zero
Okay.
for 22 miles. And so that had me thinking afterwards, like, yeah, I'm taking in 750 milligrams of sodium, but do I need 1250? Do I need 1,000? Like, there's a very fine balance there. And I know in that last 10K, I had 24 ounces of fluid in my Nathan bottle with the carbs, and I think I had maybe 500 milligrams of sodium, but I only ended up drinking half that during that run. I had a lot of fluid in my belly. We talked about that, like it was sloshing around. But I still think like maybe I need more sodium. It was a very humid day that we were racing. It was hot. It was in the 80s, a lot of sun. Maybe our bodies rip through sodium faster and we need more. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've been talking to a friend of mine who's really experienced with ultra running, and he's suggesting something similar. It's a lot of, I think, trial and error with
Mhm.
electrolyte and sodium replacement, but there's sweat sensors that you can buy now, and it will determine your sweat rate and what you're losing, how much sweat and sodium you're actually losing to determine how much you should replace with. And that's
Mhm.
probably the next level of trying to really get specific and dialed in. Short of that, I think it's about, it kind of goes back to what we were saying before. It's training to prepare for the race. So
Yeah,
if you're never training in a way that replicates that effort level or close to that, that time level, it's going to be really hard to predict what you need to do on race day. So
sure.
so really good training prepares you not just in the the runs or the bikes, but the nutrition and the hydration and the gear and everything that you then have to deal with on race day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Most people know that staying hydrated is essential to nearly every bodily function, but 75% of Americans still do not consume enough fluid daily. As we age, bodily changes make staying hydrated even harder, especially without artificial additives or excess sugars. That's where Native Path comes in with extra help. Native Path's Hydrate is not just another drink mix. It's a thoughtfully designed formula packed with BCAAs and all 9 essential amino acids to help with muscle recovery and overall vitality. Plus, it's completely sugar-free and 100% natural. With their Native Hydrate product, you can fuel your body with essential electrolytes at the cellular level for overall vitality. Unlike other hydration drink mixes that are designed for marathon runners and contain upwards of 1,000 milligrams of sodium, Native Hydrate contains just 230 milligrams of sodium for optimal daily hydration. It's free of artificial flavors, sugars, and dyes. It's only 5 calories per serving, and every order comes with a 360-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it risk-free. Visit nativehydrate.com/co-movement to see what Native Hydrate could do for your health. Again, that is nativehydrate.com/co-movement. All right, so let's wrap this up. Let's talk about a few things here. Recovery afterwards. How is your recovery looking? What are we at? 2 weeks now, right? 2 weeks and a few days.
Yes.
Is that it? Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you feel? What did your week after look like? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I feel pretty good now. Those couple days after, similarly where I cramped, those muscles were smashed. I was really limping for a couple of days, and I intended to take the following week pretty light. I mostly adhered to that. I actually ran Monday night a pretty decent effort on my legs that were hurting, and I've done this before. In some ways, I feel like it actually helps expedite some recovery. It gets some blood flow and some movement to them. But after that, kind of mostly packed it in for the week and kind of came back around to some training last weekend. But now 2 weeks out, I'm feeling pretty good and building back. So I'm glad to be at, I feel fully recovered.
Yeah. Similar with me, really sore in the hamstrings for a week. I did one 3.5-mile run the first week there, and then I did 3/4 mile swim and a 10-mile bike in one day of strength training. Really low volume. And then this week, ramping up a little bit more. But for me, because I don't have a race on the schedule right now, I'm obviously training, and I'm going to play around with certain things, but I'm listening to my body. Like, I do want to do a little bit more strength training. The month before, well, 3-4 weeks, before I slacked off on that portion, and rightfully so. Like, I needed to really sharpen the muscles that were going to be used in that race. But there's a lot of benefits to being strong. I don't mean I'm far from weightlifting strong, but
Yeah,
put together. So
definitely.
I'm going to be jumping into that, a little bit along with all my other stuff. But so let's see here. Okay, results. So just for listeners, like, you're a lot faster. You finished 3 miles before me, approximately. I remember I was just starting my second lap on the 10K and you were coming through. So where were you? 3:30, what?
Or I think
3:34? Okay,
I
yep.
was
And I was at,
hoping to be faster than that, under 3:30. But I'm
yep.
gonna go to my grave saying it was because the swim was longer this year.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, it was. Actually didn't text you that, but no, it was like it was 8. Look on my Strava. I think it was like 8:25 or 8:50
Yeah,
on the swim. And then the second part was like 16:50, 16:80. So no,
yeah,
it was longer. So we could blame it on that. So I was at 4 hours, 7 minutes. The week before I had a goal of 4:20. The night before I recalculated some things more precisely, and I thought, like, if I had a really, really, really good day, I could go 4:06, and I did 4:07. So I
great.
think, again, I think that's important for people to have goals, and so they can visualize that. All right, we'll rip through this. Things learned. Give me 1 to 3 things that you learned. I know we sort of already went over some stuff, but stuff that's sort of sticking out right now.
For me, it's going to be a lot about getting more dialed with nutrition and the sodium, as I keep saying. Like, that's going to be important for me moving forward. I want to get better at that. And This year, I felt like I did a really good job saving time in all the places that I mentioned before. And I learned a lot and I practiced a lot for that. So I learned more about how to set up and be very fast through transitions. When there's 4 of them, those add up over a course of a day like this. Fast at the aid stations, smoother in and out of the water. Those are really specific and small in some ways, but for me, they felt pretty important. And then, just learned a lot about how to bump into a roadblock and try to keep my head on my shoulders and manage it and, sort of salvage from that point forward. I'm sure that's not the last time I'm going to have to do that.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, for me, a few things. I guess I'll piggyback on your transition thing. You helped me a ton in that 3 to 5 minutes on race day to organize my transition. I'm sort of a mess. I just have a bag with a bunch of shit in it. This year, I had a bag that Andy lent me that was like perfect shape for all the fueling. So I had my bottles labeled. I had my socks rolled properly and the bike shoes that you showed me, which helped tremendously. For such a small, tiny space with a lot of stuff, I really was happy with how that was organized. It was thoughtless. And I just went in robotically and I took care of that. And you helped me a ton with that.
There's probably 3 to 5 minutes there on a day like that.
Yeah. You borrowed me a triathlon suit on race day, which you're not supposed to try new shit on race day, but I definitely did. And it was a game changer. So I'm known for I'm prepared physically and mentally, but like my gear, right? Like I just sort of get through it. The last 2 years I did Delta, I did no wetsuit on the swim. I swam in my bike shorts and then I would bike and then I ran in my bike shorts. Well, as the distances started to get longer in training and I was doing that, I was getting crazy chafing, like not like painful. We talked about it. And so I had a strategy of going in with just having tons of that lube butter, whatever they call it. And you said, well, why don't I bring a few tri suits and you try that on? And I put it on in the bathroom about 30 minutes before we started. And I was like, holy shit, like fit perfect. It felt like you were naked. Like I was so comfortable. I didn't have one blister, one chafe, one male readjustment. Like I felt good, so thank you for that. And I'm buying that same exact one here, the Synergy tri-suit. Yeah.
You're welcome. You looked legit. And, that tri-suit's been through a lot. It's better off you don't even know.
Yeah. Well, I gave it to you pretty filthy. So thanks for washing it for me.
I washed it twice. Don't worry about it.
All right. What else? The mantra I mentioned, relax with speed, helped. I mentioned training for the whiteface race, built leg capacity. Yeah. And I just mentioned the goals, having clear goals, vision helps. You need that. And that's that. Oh, and lastly, I learned that I can swim with bad leg cramps and not die,
There you go.
which was sort of cool. So
isn't that often, the giant takeaway is just you're learning something that is showing you that you're more capable of what you thought you were. And if, whatever version of that is, that's always a good thing to take away from a race.
Yeah. Brandon, anything else you want to add on before we wrap this up?
I think you covered it. It was a great day. I had a lot of fun preparing and training, and I love being able to do things like that with friends. So that was awesome.
Yeah, no, likewise, man. All right, dude. We'll talk soon. Thanks, Brandon.
All right, take care.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting our sponsors, Native Path Supplements and Lombardi Chiropractic. Your support helps us to bring you 2 new episodes each month. See the show notes for more details and a nice discount from our sponsors. Thank you, and see you next time on the Co-Movement Gym Podcast.